Okay. We're going to call to order the meeting of the Westfield City Council. First point of order, it's good to see everyone here today, back in person. But for those of you that are with us through Zoom or through a Skype call, please be sure to mute yourself. We're getting some feedback, and we want to be able to hear everybody and make sure all the communications are clear, so please do that. Thank you. Should we do the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have Reverend Tim with us. Reverend Tim Krupski has a few words to say.
We pray for your blessing upon this community, upon our state, upon our nation. We pray that you would bless and guide us as we navigate these times with the pandemic. We pray for health and safety. We pray for blessing upon the vaccines that are now getting the way out into the people and that they are blessing others.
Yeah.
We pray this as well this evening that you bless the business of this meeting, of this community, allow for it to bring about good growth and health and safety for the people of this community. Bless all those who lead and give them wisdom. We ask that in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, are you on the line or is Cindy on the line?
She
Kim?
was, but she's having trouble, so I can do it.
Okay, great. Can you please note the presence of a quorum?
Scott Fry,
Here.
Troy Patton,
Here.
Joe Edwards,
Here.
Scott Willis. Cindy Spoljarek.
Here.
Jake Gilbert,
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay. The agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to first item of business, which is ordinance 21-12, amending ordinance 0602, replacing certain sections to allow the council president to serve on the Advisory Plan Commission, the APC, and also allow the president of the APC to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals. This is for an adoption consideration this evening. In order to have an adoption consideration on the evening, we're going to have to vote to suspend the rules in order to do so. So I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to adopt ordinance 21-12.
So
at this
moved.
first moving. So moved by Joe Edwards. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. Scott Fry.
Scott Fry, second that. At that point, I'll open it to discussion.
I've got a point. You know, it concerns me that some of our council members here have attempted to suspend the rules. Seems like a rush to change. The ordinance in question has been in place since our city was founded, and it was passed to ensure a balance of power amongst the council. Voting it down seems like a short-sighted attempt at a power grab and is a textbook example of bad government. To make such a change to the rules, in my opinion, does not allow for a thorough vetting of the long and short-term impacts of this, and it certainly doesn't allow those that we serve an ability to weigh in on this. As such, I'll be voting no to suspend the rules.
Any other comments?
I'll make a comment. I think it's, I appreciate your comment, Scott. I think it's really funny, though, that you would make that comment even though you sit on other committees like the library board and do things behind closed doors, yet you're making that same comment about somebody else. So, if you're gonna call it others, call it yourself as well, so.
I was on the library board, Troy, before I was ever voted council. And every single one of our meetings is done in public, so I don't know what you mean by behind.
Well,
closed
you
doors.
didn't, you haven't, so.
Okay.
All right, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to, since we have one, it has to be a unanimous vote. So since we have a party already objecting to it, I'll just take a quick vote at this point in time. And then what we'll do is we will introduce this as an ordinance when we will move it for adoption at the next council meeting on Tuesday, February 16th. So can I call for a vote then?
Question.
Yes.
Go ahead, call for the vote.
I'll call for a vote, okay. This is the vote to suspend the rules. Kim, can you call for the vote?
Sure. Cindy Spaljerik,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
No.
motion fails 6-1.
All right. I now would like to make the motion to, make a motion to entertain ordinance 21-12, amending the ordinance 0602, replacing certain sections to allow the council president to serve on the advisory planning commission, and also to allow the president of the APC to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. I'd like to open the discussion on this and explain to everyone how we got to this point. When I considered running for and accepting the position of the president of the city council, it was with my understanding that I would be allowed to remain on the APC as a member of that body. In preparation, just kind of the homework I did on that is I went back and looked at the rules and regulations of the APC. I looked at the 4 last revisions of the rules and regulations, and nowhere in those rules and regulations does it prohibit the president of the city council to sit on the APC. So when I agreed to the presidency of the council, it was with my understanding that I would be allowed to sit on the APC and move forward at that point. We, as a council, just the big picture, we try to look at everybody's skills and weaknesses and realizing that we all bring something different to the table. We've got several folks that are extremely well-versed in finances. We put them on the financial committee. We've got folks who have been involved with schools and cities before, and we put them on our Oversight Committee. And when it came to the APC, we've got Cindy Spaljerik, whose background is in urban planning, and then with my background in development and construction, I seem like a good fit for the APC. So that's how we arrived at those positions last year, and was hoping to continue those as we move forward. When I met with the city to discuss this, the city, they felt the same way I felt, that this is an ordinance that was put in place long before we became a city. It was an ordinance that wanted to bring a number of people in to give them an opportunity to serve. We think that's of value, but it was also an ordinance that unfortunately did not take into account the skill sets of people that we have in serving offices today. At that point in time, as discussing this with the administration, the planning department also suggested that it made sense to change another part of this ordinance, which had prohibited the president of the APC from serving on the BZA. There are often times when that president could be an attorney. An attorney would be welcome to be on the BZA, and so there have been times in the past where they've struggled with trying to find a BZA member where they could have placed the APC member on it. So at this point, this ordinance is to make both changes, to allow the council president to participate in the APC, as well as to allow the APC president to participate in the BZA. So that's all I can tell you about this ordinance. Any comments? Okay, hearing no comments, what we'll do is we'll close this for now, and we'll come back to it at our next meeting. Moving on, next is council appointments. For the coming year, it's my feeling we should hold the council committees as they were last year. So we're going to maintain the finance committee as it's currently as staffed, with Troy Patton as president of the finance committee, Scott Fry and Joe Edwards serving on the finance committee. The oversight committee will be composed of 3 individuals, Jake Gilbert, Scott Willis, and Joe Edwards, who will serve as president of the oversight committee. At this time, I would like to make a recommendation that we approve Cindy Spoljaric as a representative, council representative to the APC. Can I get a voice acclamation to that, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Any nays?
Aye.
Okay, Cindy, you will be the next, and continue on the APC.
Thank you for putting your trust in me.
All right, the next council appointment for the RDC, Melissa Risk will unfortunately be leaving the RDC this year, and we want to thank her for her service in 2020. I'm going to make a motion that Melissa be replaced by Brian Ferguson. Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from Brian? I think most of you probably know Brian. He's run for city office in the past. He's pretty outspoken in the community and is known to attend a lot of our meetings. So he's been visible and interested in city business. So can I have a vote by acclamation for Brian? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? It carries. Congratulations, Brian. You're on the call. All right. The next step is the approval of the minutes from January 11th. Does anyone have any additions or deletions to those minutes? Can I have an approval, a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Okay, the motion has been made and approved. Hearing, can we have a vote by acclamation again on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Carries.
Who made the motion and second on that?
Who seconded?
Scott.
Scott Willis.
I moved.
Thank you.
Sorry. The next item on our agenda is the claims docket. Claims docket for February 8th of 2021. Is there a motion to approve that docket?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Scott Willis made the motion, and Jake seconded it. Again, a voice, can we have a voice vote by acclamation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, we've got a couple of miscellaneous business items and really special recognition presentations. The first is an update from the EMS Chief, Patrick Hutchinson, on our EMS program. Chief?
Thank you. I was just telling Chief Reed this afternoon that it was 2 years ago this month that somebody approached me about meeting with him to come to Westfield and see if we could take the EMS division of the fire department in a new direction. And after 22 years in the city of Indianapolis training the paramedics for the Indianapolis Fire Department and Indianapolis EMS, So, there we go. Obviously, a lot of the public thinks that what we do is respond to fires, but probably about 65% of all of our calls are medical in nature. And every member of the fire department is at a minimum a firefighter EMT, and then we have about 22 licensed paramedics in the state of Indiana. In 2020, we set out to start kind of in a new direction with our medical direction. So in Indiana, you have to, by law, have a supervising hospital. Previously, that was IU Health Ball Memorial in Muncie. And so we aligned ourselves with Riverview Health in Noblesville. Of course, we have a Riverview Health Hospital right here in Westfield as well. And the medical direction is provided through the IU School of Medicine, the Department of Emergency Medicine, the Division of Out-of-Hospital Care. Next slide. What that does is we have a physician medical director. His name is Dr. Greg Ferris. He's a faculty at the IU School of Medicine. He is fellowship trained, meaning he's done, in addition to medical school and residency training, he's done a 1-year in-depth fellowship training in emergency medical services, system development, protocols, laws, and things like that. And he's been working with us, with our partners at Noblesville Fire Department, Sheridan, and Wayne Township Fire Department to kind of have a regional approach, so it's not so split up. He provides the medical oversight. We practice protocols legally under his direction. He provides clinical education. As a matter of fact, he'll be here the next 3 days to visit with each one of our shifts to go over hemorrhage control and wound packing with some high-tech human simulators. Helps us with a lot with not only public health and wellness, but also has helped us mitigate so many issues internally, so we have a safe work environment and keeping our firefighters safe and preventing the spread of the virus when they go home. And then risk management, so that the procedures, we really become firm in evaluating our competencies, documenting that to help minimize risk and also improve competency and skill and knowledge for all of our personnel. So one of the big things that I saw as potential, different fire departments call them different things. In the city and some of the neighboring departments, they call it the Ems Duty Officer. We decided to go with the term Field Resource Paramedic. And so currently we have 3 full-time, there's 1 per shift. And they are really where the rubber meets the road with our EMS system. So on an operational basis, they make sure that everybody has the medications, equipment, supplies that they need. And this has been huge, a big change for us, because just the amount of PPE that's required on every response that we go on has just exponentially increased the amount of work that they do from just everyday business prior to March of last year. Our goal was to launch this in May, and we had interviewed in 2019, selected the personnel, and we decided to pull the trigger a month early just because we were starting to get overwhelmed with concerns with the virus. So one of the things that was already in existence, but with just a couple people, was this community paramedicine program. So that helps us visit patients in the home. They probably have chronic illness, heart failure, diabetes, maybe asthma, and we can visit those patients and communicate with their physician. You link up with other resources in the community to keep those people at home and keep them safe. For example, a heart failure patient may start having modest gains in weight, but if we notice those things, it's probably fluid retention. So then we can be in communication with their physician about perhaps increasing a diuretic. That keeps people at home, that keeps them happier, decreases 911 calls, and decreases hospitalizations and those types of costs. We do respond to major incidents, so any type of serious vehicular accident, tactical run, structure fires, they're the medical branch commander on those things, and then mass gatherings. So obviously we're hoping to return to somewhat normal, but obviously Colts Camp and all the other activities that go on there, we have a lot of people at one place, one time, and so we provide staffing not only for the team, as we've done in the past, but also all the visitors to Grand Park for not just Colts Camp, but any of the activities that are out there. So one of the things that this has really done, especially with the pandemic, is it's keep people out of the hospital, and they're able to develop these relationships. They usually identify a patient and they see them either every week, every 2 weeks, whatever we feel is appropriate. Next slide. And then, of course, March came and things started out slowly and amped up with the pandemic. The field resource paramedics all have a minimum of 3 years experience as paramedics, 2 years minimum experience at Westfield alone, but that's just the qualifications that were required. These people have years and years of experience and have additional certifications, also serve as instructor in specialty disciplines that we practice. So they're a perfect person to kind of be a liaison between the physician and the patient. They can speak the language, they know these patients, they know their history, they know their medications. And then with the pandemic specifically, we developed a protocol with our medical director, Dr. Ferris, so that in the past we would traditionally transport patients, but there have been probably 2 big peaks of the virus that hospitals were taking a hit, and it just served the hospitals better, it served our patients better. Kind of the last place you really want to be if you're sick is in a hospital, especially with something as contagious as this. So we were able, in many cases, to keep that patient home, provide them with medications that we normally wouldn't leave with the patient, self-care instructions, and then follow-up. We would come back and visit that person in person or phone call to make sure that they were comfortable. And it was pretty impressive how many people appreciated that. They didn't want to go to the hospital unless it was absolutely necessary. And then at any time, we can consult medical direction if we feel that, even though the patient really doesn't want to go, we feel that it's dangerous to leave them at the home. We always had that available. And then the PPE, we worked with our training chief, Chief of Training and Safety, Chief Johnson. And so with all the federal information and stockpiles of PPE, at times it was very difficult to get that. We've managed to keep a good stock of that and keep our people protected in ways that we never imagined, prior to 2020 that we'd need to. So some of the things that we did specifically, the Hamilton County Health Department reached out and was trying to increase, throw that net wider to capture more people and get tests. And we really found this very beneficial. We found this in our own department. So for many months, we had a great partnership with Riverview Hospital. We'd collect the nasal specimen, and we would deliver it to their lab, and we'd have results in about 4 hours. But the problem with that is once the person had an exposure, we had to wait 4 days for them to be, in that incubation period. Then when the rapid testing came out, if the person had symptoms, we would find out in 15 minutes. So that not only helped us internally, but huge numbers in the community of finding out who could possibly be affected. And so we increased the dispatch of the field resource paramedics. So on certain call types that would be potential COVID patients, they could test the patient on the scene. Sometimes we'd again keep that patient out of the hospital system to reduce surge at the hospital, and then provide them with those resources, the medications, the home care instructions. Other times the patient would need to go, but that expedited their triage through the hospital because they already had a positive test. And so placement in the hospital would be important, certain air pressure rooms and things like that. So it identified those. It also helped us identify who had it, and then epidemiologists use what's called a basic reproduction number. And it might be on the next slide. I don't know if it does down a little bit on this one. Maybe it's the next one. There we go. So by identifying a person that is positive, you take that and times that by about 3.08 plus or minus a few numbers, and that'll tell you how many people you've probably prevented the spread. So say that there's somebody in the household, say the father tests positive, then that will help prevent maybe the mother, the children, continue to go to school, go to work until they can be tested, and just prevents the spread of the coronavirus. So again, we found this huge to be in the community. We estimate about 290 people based on all the tests we've done. And it really, as they say, helps stop the spread, both at work, at home, at school, et cetera. So you can see there just kind of up to where we are currently, we've done 211 tests, 61 were positive, a lot of negative tests, which is good news. Next slide. So a great partnership we had with the Hamilton Health Department, who said, can you help us reach more people in testing? And so we saw this as a potential. After we launched this, the media was very interested, and we were getting calls from fire departments all over the state wanting to see how we did that. I think we were so successful at that when it came time for vaccinations. Everything kind of unfolded quickly, and they needed help getting personnel that were qualified and trained to do the vaccinations. So our field resource paramedics again stepped up, and off-duty, they were over giving vaccinations at the 4-H fairgrounds. We've already been in communication with the schools when vaccinations are available to teachers, if they need help and support for that, as well as a homebound Hoosier program that the Indiana State Department of Health plans to launch for patients, identifying those patients that wouldn't be able to go to a clinic, go to a doctor's office or a max vaccination clinic, so we can go and give them the vaccine. Obviously, we have to do all of this while being safe, so we require, and we still require, masks are worn in the fire stations and in all of our vehicles. The only time the mask comes off is to eat. They can take the mask off when they sleep, and during those times, they're distanced. We decompressed, if you will, our bunk room, our dormitory, and found other places in the fire stations to place people so that when they're asleep and snoring with their mouth wide open or something like that, those droplets aren't dispersing and creating aerosols in the dormitory. Meals, which are a big part of firehouse life, everyone sits around the table, are not quite like that. We space people at the large table, and we have a couple bistro tables set up so that people are distanced. They're obviously there for 24 hours. The only other time the mask comes off is if you're taking the mask off to put on your N95. And previously, we were requiring the N95 on any medical run, just because the risk was so high of not knowing if patients could be potentially infected. We were, and we're just backing off on this because of the downward trend in the cases, the positivity rate, hospitalizations, and deaths. But up until this week, we would screen everyone for their temperature, and we had an 8-question questionnaire to identify people that might have symptoms and prevent them from coming to the workplace. Typically, when people would develop symptoms, it'd be somewhere in the shift, and we'd end up sending those people home. Then we would test their colleagues that would be in close contact. But we really feel that we help stop the spread of that. A lot of work taking these countermeasures of distancing and mask wearing, which hasn't been especially comfortable. And then we're doing the PCR, which we can still do a PCR test. That's the more specific test, but it takes time. It has to be done in a laboratory. And then the rapid test, provided the patient has symptoms. If the person does not have symptoms, the rapid test really is not useful. Next slide. And all of this while still taking care of everyday emergencies, car accidents, heart attacks, other traumatic injuries, people that have difficulty breathing. Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that the guy down the street isn't going to have a heart attack. So at times we have to remind ourselves we have to stay focused and continue training on those things. And we've taken a lot of countermeasures. We've resumed doing hands-on training, but when we're close to each other, we wear masks. We do distancing whenever possible. And instead of having people come to headquarters in large groups where we can kind of knock out a training to a large group of people, we go to them and conduct it at the station. It's smaller. And actually, we've learned that that's better received by the personnel, and we get better feedback and more questions when maybe people aren't as intimidated to ask a technical question about a medical emergency in a large group. Looking forward to some things we'll be doing. We're expanding our behavioral health, which I think is on the next slide. One of our other personnel is developing a program for hands-only CPR and our Pulse Point app, which identifies, if you have the application, the closest AED, and will direct someone where that closest public AED is so they could go fetch it. And so that'll be an initiative that we're rolling out as well. Behavioral health was, the plan was it'd be a cornerstone of our program, and really looking at data when I first came into the job for the Wellbeing Coalition and seeing a lot of the mental health issues and the response that we could change of, instead of always seeing an ambulance and a fire engine, if you're trying to de-escalate a situation, having so many people is not always helpful. But there's a lot of specialized training, and we want to do it appropriately. And unfortunately, what the Mental Health Alliance calls crisis intervention training really has just been canceled repeatedly after the pandemic. So we've been so frustrated. So we're excited. The first week of May, we'll be taking this course, the 3 FRPs and myself. I'm actually right here in Hamilton County over at Fisher's Fire Department. It's largely for corrections officers and law enforcement officers, but they have found a niche, you know, as we've heard with all the demonstrations and things over the summer months. Sometimes a person that's not in a police uniform can be just as well suited to help with some of those situations. So we're looking forward to doing that and being able to provide some alternatives as far as assessment and management plans, and maybe not taking the patient in a police cruiser or even an ambulance, and coming up with some alternatives with that. So we sat, you know, we're on the conference call for the Wellbeing Coalition, and so again, kind of monitoring what the needs are in the community. So this is something that we've talked a lot about, and we just really have been kind of stifled because we just haven't had the education and training. So we'll be looking forward to doing that and working with partners on other fire departments that have created something similar. And that's pretty much how it brings us up to date.
Awesome.
Any
Thank you.
Questions?
I'd just like to thank you guys. Chief Hutchinson knows I came and met with some of the guys about mental health and serving our community through this FRP program and what we're looking for in terms of the training and so forth. But as a council, we just want to thank you, and we understand that a firefighter mental health is critical too. And so just we want to support you, and we just thank you for the job you do. Appreciate it.
Chief Hutchinson, I would add to that and just say that we, as a council, we truly appreciate everything you do every day,
Yeah,
particularly during these really tough times. It's just good and it's comforting to know that you're out there doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next presentation, William Knox, Grant Park. William's going to tell us how we're doing, how we did last year.
Yes, good evening, council members. For the record, William Knox, Director of Grand Park. And I know you've got a lot of important business to get to tonight, but I'll try to be quick to get through this presentation. Just about a year ago, I returned home from a trip from China, actually, in January of 20. I went there to speak at a conference for sports tourism. And I was there to speak about not only the city of Westfield, but Grand Park, and how we've been able to, I'm gonna relax this for a second, transform this city into a world-class destination for sports. And when you look at the size of this community and what we were able to do, they were very fascinated with the programming we were able to put together, but also how we were able to infuse the tourism aspect into what we were doing from the sports standpoint. So I was a keynote, and this was the first time I'd ever gone anywhere and had a translator, but this was a slide that really kind of resonated with people when they looked at how we look to transform our community through sports tourism. So not in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd come back and less than 2 months later, we would have to shut our doors due to COVID-19. So as we look, I think this is not the correct presentation. This is the old one, but we'll get through this. So just keep scrolling for me. Keep going. You'll see COVID. It'll be a green slide that says COVID. Yep, keep going. There we go. Okay. So I'll have to slide through this. This is another presentation that we did. But obviously March 16th is the day we had to shut our doors, and we didn't reopen until May. And many of our competitors didn't even get an opportunity to open at that time. So we were, once we closed the doors, we took some time to really reflect to understand what we needed to do as a facility to be able to reopen safely. Many of you are aware we did do a partnership with the Sports Innovation Institute at IUPUI. We conducted a research project, and we were very hopeful to get a few responses from individuals to help guide our efforts as we look to reopen. We ended up with over 10,000 respondents to this survey that really helped us understand what we needed to do when we reopened the campus. So mid-May is when we were able to open. Those restrictions that we had on us at that time kept us to 25 or less, which was very difficult. So we worked with the state and the governor's office to understand the scale of the park and how we could go in and segment the park into sections so that we could have additional opportunities to host events. Because of our good work, this was also replicated throughout the state. So many other venues similar to ours was able to reopen in a different fashion than we was originally proposed due to some of our efforts. The other big challenge for us, I don't know if you remember back in those days when the governor would put in his new orders, they would start on a Sunday. And that's very difficult for us as we're kind of just halfway through our tournaments for the weekend. So we were fortunately able to work with them as well to have those start on Monday or after, such that we can make the adjustment after a weekend time period. So let's go ahead and scroll this, and I apologize, I'm not sure how we got this presentation up, but this is an older version. So obviously we created the Grand Park Safety Team. That helped us immensely as we look to really reopen the park. If you came into the event center starting May until today, you would get your temperature taken before you entered the building. And there's a lot of signage in the building that's making sure people are socially distanced. It was a little more difficult when we were still outdoors. People didn't really feel the need to wear the mask, but we kind of harped on them. Our Westfield Welcome team came alongside of us, and we were able to deploy resources to really help us manage that opportunity. A lot of our event owners were really good about helping us as well, so that worked out. I'm gonna have you keep scrolling, keep going. So this is to talk a little bit about the operations, and really this is looking at where we are current day. We were very fortunate to, looking at 2019 in comparison to 2020, we didn't fall off too much for events. And you'll see here in a few, when I talk a little bit about some of the financials, how our events shifted. We did have to cancel a lot of activities, but we were very fortunate to pick up a lot of new opportunities because of our position and our state being very progressive as we looked at managing the COVID-19 situation. These are some of the marquee events for 21. A lot of these are familiar events. Just to give you a little history on one of those, NXT Sports. This year we're finishing up their we signed a 5-year agreement with them initially. They started off with one event. We're working to sign another 5-year extension with that group that encompasses 5 events. So they've really, this is a lacrosse group. They found us, and we're very fortunate to kind of be one of the first lacrosse groups we work with, and now we're transitioning them to potentially, by the time we're through with this next 5-year extension, there'll be up to 6 events on the campus annually. And this is some of our non-sporting activity. I think most of you are familiar with the Suburban Indies and Whale of a Sail. Those are consignment type sales that we have. This is where we have the most capacity for growth within the event center, and this is kind of going to be our focus area. We do have a new show coming to the event center this coming January, the Midwest Ag and Equipment and Technology Expo, and that'll be a pretty cool opportunity for us to showcase the building in a different light as well, so we're excited about that. Keep going, because I only got 10 minutes, so I can't spend too much time on that stuff. So I just mentioned a little bit, a lot of our opportunity is non-sporting activity. Outdoors, both on the diamond and the field side, we're probably at about, between the two, we're at about 90% capacity. Given the fact that we've got to let certain assets rest, and as we transition through the different things, we can't take too much use outdoors unless we expand some of the facilities. Indoors, because of the nature of the building and how we operate, we have a lot of capacity there for what I call the non-sporting activity. Now, the production side on these are a little more elaborate. As you can see, this is from Gaylor when we hosted them in the building last year, sorry. It's quite a big setup when we look at these non-sporting events. So on the front end and back end, there's a lot of time that's consumed. So we just got to be smart about how we manage those, because the Saturday that this event was done at noon, by 5 o'clock, they were playing soccer on that field. But it took a lot of manpower to get that to happen. So I want you to scroll all the way to where we get to financials. Oh, we're there, perfect. So I'll talk a little bit about the financials quickly. And again, this is not the presentation that I intended to share, so I'm gonna scroll through some of these. But obviously, you guys know this, the $85 million investment kind of transitions into the $1.2 billion of economic activity for the city. Not saying that 100% of that is a direct result of Grand Park, but I'd have to imagine that a good portion was sped up due to Grand Park. and the additional infrastructure that was put in place around the park. So you're probably gonna go a couple of slides, keep going, keep going. So this slide here just shows the cash balance, and again, this is a old presentation, but current day, we're at about 3.9 million in our operating account, which I call our operating account / replacement account. And this obviously has been accumulated over the years. And this past year, which you'll see here in a minute, we're very fortunate to end in the black. If somebody would have told me in March, you've got an opportunity to break even, I would have said, I'll take it. But we're fortunate to get some things done, and we're able to kind of come out the year on the top side. So current day, as of about yesterday, I look at this often, we're at about 3.9 million, and I'll go into some of the operational expenses and revenue. So this is just a 4-year view of historical financials. I think I shared this with you guys a couple of meetings ago. I want to go to where we're looking at 2020. So if you look at 2020, you could see second quarter, it was a little rough. We canceled a lot of activity. Some of it we were not able to replace. We had to it was gone for the year. Some of it we were able to shift into Q3 and Q4, but if you could look at the totals, we ended up a little less than $700,000. We had budgeted $900,000, so we're about $200,000 off, which in my opinion is remarkable for the year. You know, as we look at 21, this is just a breakdown of some of those operating. You can go. Yep. This is a breakdown of some of those operating revenues. This is where the money comes from. You could see the big black section at the bottom. Field rental is the biggest portion, but then there's also hotel commissions and a whole host of other things that go into that revenue category. The next one will go through some of the expenses. These are very common, some of our operating expenses, staff, and the whole host of those things as well. And the last slide I'll go to is 20, here we go. So these are our projections for 21, and this is where we're forecasting for a profit yet again. We have reforecasted about 3 times just due to the pandemic lingering. We've had to push 2 events to the second quarter that was supposed to take place in Q1. So our Q1, once you guys start to see the quarterly breakdowns, may be a little light in comparison to where we wanted it to be. But I think when we end up the year, we'll be good, provided that we continue to see reduced numbers and we don't have restrictions on who can access the venue. So that's kind of the quick 10-minute rundown. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. That's the best report we've received on that for a long, long time.
No problem. Perfect.
Hi, William, I got a question for you. So, first of all, I'd like to say thanks. I know, I mean, I was out there for the baseball side, and man, those guys,
Yeah.
they did a phenomenal job. I'm serious. I didn't know how they were gonna pull it off, but they really did a good job. I mean, hands down, they got so many teams through there.
Yeah.
And I know they extended their season,
Yep.
you know, that they didn't necessarily have to do, but they did, and they did a phenomenal job. The one thing I would ask of you to do, and obviously you may not have that information now, but there's certain things, and I know, and I apologize because I know we were going to talk about this morning, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, but you know, I think we just had maybe some miscommunication or something this morning. But so the 1.2 billion in economic development, maybe like a breakdown of that, of some sort, and maybe that's not to you, maybe that goes on to the administration.
I can push that to where it needs to go.
And then, I'm sorry, I gotta put my glasses back on because I can't read my own writing. The total bonds for Grand Park, I may be incorrect, but I thought it was over 100 million total. And maybe we're allocating certain things to certain places or something like that. But maybe what the breakdown of those bonds are and where they're allocated to,
Yeah.
just so we can see, because, so that way we understand that like in the building that you're in, at some point, in fact, I was talking to Mayor Cook this morning, I said, you know, those things are gonna need a refresh. And he said, we are saving, you know, so if we have to redo carpet and
Yeah.
things like that. But at some point, you know, probably past everybody that's on this city council, someday, you know, there may need a $10 million refresh of the building. How are we gonna pay for that? What are we gonna do? So if we could have maybe a breakout of those bonds, I think, I think maybe if we start with that, I mean, I've got plenty of more questions, but
Yeah,
I can go on for
we can,
about
I'll
20,
get with
30 minutes.
John Rogers to get that pulled together. I know he has that fairly readily available that we can show you kind of where it
Okay.
is current day and then where it's projected to be in the future.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, William. Appreciate that. Okay, before we move on to the next item, I know it's going to be a long night, but I'm going to ask that we move back quickly to council appointments. And I think I skipped this because I'm probably embarrassed about it, but I might as well bring it up right now. When I was looking to see all the various appointments that the council makes, we don't have very good records. And Brian Zager last year at this time was going to put together some information for us on BZA appointments and other possible appointments, and we never really got that information, and I'll take responsibility for neglecting to follow up on them with them to get that. In any case, I did talk to Manny Herzog this week, our new city attorney, and asked him if the city happened to have the information regarding, for example, the BZA, who the council's appointment is on the BZA, what the term of that appointment is, and he got back to me and said that really that's not the administration's bailiwick, that I should ask the city clerk. So I've asked the city clerk for that, and she's struggling to find that because apparently over the years, the various councils and boards and commissions have not necessarily told her, informed her when appointments were made. So, long story short, it will probably take us another month to two to figure out what's going on, but hopefully within 4 weeks from now, we will have an idea as far as who our appointment is to the BCA, and if there are any other appointments that we need to make. And I'm going to ask our Oversight Committee if they would to help me research that. We'll get with the city clerk and research it. We'll also be talking to the administration, and at the end of the day, hopefully a month from now, we'll have that information, and we can make any appointments that we need to make at that point in time. So, sorry I neglected that before.
One point of order, Mr. President Pro
Yes,
Tem. I'm not the city attorney, Mr. Bergen is, but if you need to follow up on any of that information, I'd be happy to chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry, who's the city attorney?
Blake Bergen, right behind me.
I've not heard his name. How do you spell it? Who?
I'm sorry, you haven't heard my name, is that what you said?
Yeah.
B-U-R-G-A-N, Blake Bergen.
B-U-R-G-G-A-N?
G-A-N, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, the next item on our is old business. And we're looking at ordinance 21-03, Maple No PUD, Amendment 5. This ordinance was introduced at the council back on January 11th. Went to the APC for a hearing, followed by an APC recommendation on February 1st, and it's up for adoption and consideration. Is there someone here that's going to speak to that?
Hello, this is John Dobashewitz. I didn't know if staff took the role in this or the petitioner did, but we represent the applicant. As you indicated, the matter came back to the council with a unanimous favor recommendation on the ordinance that's presented to you this evening. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to address those in advance of adoption and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I have a motion then to approve 2103, or can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve 2103.
Thank you,
Go
Troy.
ahead, Cindy.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. And Cindy, wherever you are. All right,
And this is primarily just signage, isn't it?
yes,
Okay.
right. This is the signage in the outlying lots that border the Meyer project.
Okay.
And it's
Yes,
really
sir.
just to allow this, if, John, do you want to address that, or?
It involves three components. The first is exclusively with regard to wall signs for those outlot users. The second component is if the city were to ever adopt regulations regarding drive-through menu boards, and the third component is to clarify or really correct a typo in a prior ordinance. It does not add any additional signage, just corrects a typo, and staff asked in that we are going to be in front of the council for consideration on this item, that be added to the ordinance.
Any additional comments, questions from the council? All right, then, Kim, could you call the roll, please?
Cindy Spillier,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. The next order of business is new business, and Jeremy Lawler is going to tell us about the Mary Wilson Drain Hamilton County Drainage Board Agreement. Jeremy, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, Jeremy Lawler, Director of Public Works. Before you tonight for consideration is a petition to the Hamilton County Drainage Board specific to the repair of the Mary Wilson Drain. Kevin, if you can scroll down just to, there's an exhibit that shows the watershed. So as you can, a little bit more, yeah. You can see there, that neighborhood is Oak Park, and then where you see the dotted line and the word drain, that is the Havig Sports Fields. So we experience high water conditions during heavy rainfall in two locations. One on 161st Street at the midpoint, basically between Cary and Oak, and then also directly across from the Havig Sports Fields. Both of them are attributable to this regulated drain. It runs east-west along 161st Street and then continues south through Oak Park. There's a wooded area there, and then through the Havig Fields, and then on down through the new section of Bridgewater into the Cool Creek drain down south of 151st Street. So in order to repair these and subsequently resolve our high water issue, the surveyor requested that we petition to the Hamilton County Drainage Board so that they can consider improving this condition.
So Jeremy, they would be helping us somewhat in the funding of this also, or?
They will be funding it totally. This is a
Totally good.
regulated drain project. They just want our support, and they want an official request from the council. Happy to answer any other questions you have with that.
I have several questions. This is Cindy.
Yeah.
What impact will there be to the landowners in the area? And it says that there's a highway to benefit, and I wasn't sure what you meant by that. And also, my last question, is this going to increase the cost to anybody?
So all three of those questions are better suited for the county surveyor. We don't have any input on what gets done to the drain because it's not in our jurisdiction, it's their infrastructure. As far as the cost, my assumption is this watershed has some funds reserved for maintenance of this drain, but there is the possibility that the county could do a special assessment. I don't know if that is their intention or if they have the dollars available. As far as the impact to the residents, the county has a 75-foot top-of-bank easement on both directions of this drain, and they're within their rights to maintain it as they see fit.
So there could be kind of significant impacts to the neighbors here, and especially if they were to have a special assessment to pay. Is that correct?
Again, yeah, we should consult with the county surveyor, but yes, they're within their legal rights to do a special assessment for a reconstruction of the drain.
Well, my question here, I'm a bit concerned, why do we have to then be in agreement with them in this if it's all their domain, really?
I can get back with you on that, but it was a request from Kent Ward himself. He actually drafted the petition and asked me to
So this is more
present it to you.
for us to kind of put pressure on them. That's what that is, I'm guessing?
It is specifically showing city support for the surveyor's project as he presents the needs to the drainage board. It's very similar. Typically, this always happens if they're doing a large project within whatever corporate limits it is within the county, so. they
Okay,
happen.
but I don't know exactly what's gonna happen on their properties. I guess that's what I'm concerned about. I mean, could they be losing trees? Could there be giant holes? I mean, again, it doesn't show anything about what we're agreeing to, really.
We are not agreeing anything. We are petitioning that they repair the drain to reduce our standing water on our roads, but in the document, they refer to them as highways, as does most of the language associated with roads.
But in doing that, then we're saying that we realize there could be this special assessment on these people, and we're okay with that. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
But it has to get fixed, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, we have two options. We either continue to have water
Right.
standing in the road, or we fix the drain.
right.
Yeah.
And it does, it floods a ton.
Yeah, and it's progressively gotten worse over time. The Cary Road situation is new in the last couple of years. I don't recall it ever having flooded before. Another point of order is there are two sections of this drain that are on the Habig property that are not legal drains at this point. The county is pursuing getting easements for those pieces. We got a right of entry from them last year and did some maintenance on a small section that runs perpendicular to the right where the word drain is.
Yeah.
We did that to try to help the situation last year. It doesn't resolve it. It's
Right,
better,
yeah,
but
it still floods,
yeah.
yeah.
but it still floods, so.
So ultimately, this is something that needs to be repaired. We really don't have any say in it, other than just cooperating, so to speak.
Correct.
And we don't really have a way of knowing how it's gonna financially impact the residents. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, is there a way that we can find that information out? I mean, what would be the process for that?
Generally, what will happen is once the drainage board approves a project, then it will get designed, go out to bid, and if there is a special assessment, then all the neighborhoods, and this document lists everyone that's in that watershed, would get contacted with whatever that would be. We historically have not gotten involved in that because it's not our jurisdiction. As far as whether or not you all can have the plans, I can certainly request that. I don't know that they exist today, but this is the starting process to get them created.
I don't think we have much choice on this, really. I've dealt with the Hamilton County Drain Board before, putting in my own drains, so
Sure.
they pretty much dictate what's gonna happen. So I think
That's correct, and they are moving this forward in an effort to help us because of the flooded roadways. Okay, any questions for me? And are we-
Can I have a motion then to, let me make a motion to approve this.
I'll make a motion to approve. Troy Patton.
I'll second it.
Okay. Can we have you want to call the vote, Kim?
Does this have to be introduced,
That will-
though? I mean,
It,
first?
it doesn't.
Oh,
no.
okay.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spillier,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes,
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Sherman. The next piece of new business is Resolution 21-100, declaring a certain area within the city an economic revitalization area, qualifying certain real estate property improvements for tax abatements, qualifying certain personal property investment for tax abatement, and setting a time and place for a public hearing regarding the same. This is regarding the Westport Whiskey Project, and this is a council introduction. So I think, Todd, do you have a presentation on this?
Kai will address it.
Kai, thank you, Kai.
Good evening, Councilors. Kai Chuck, Director of Economic Development, for the record, to introduce the establishment of ERA, Economic Revitalization Area, and Real and Personal Tax Abatement for Westport Whiskey Project, also known as HQ2. The Westport Whiskey Project consists of 33,000 square feet of agritourism-based facility, including manufacturing, fulfillment, distribution, and a small retail area. The project will create 52 new jobs at the average wage of $22 an hour, with a total investment estimated at $10 million. The property in consideration for the ERA is the potential future home of Westport Whiskey, which is approximately 13 acres at the northeast corner of 191st Street and Horton Road. It's in the resolution. Yeah. You just scroll down a little further. It's an exhibition B. There we go. The property was voluntarily annexed off and approved by the City Council on October 12th. The proposed tax abatement consideration will be 10-year real property abatement and 5-year personal property abatement. And go back to the, scroll down a little bit further.
Kai, are those all sliding scale?
Yes, it's a 10-year real property tax abatement applied only to the 13,700 square foot manufacturing area, estimated at $2.4 million in value. The 10-year abatement schedule will be 10% increments, beginning 100% in year 1 and 10% reduction at 10% by the year 10. The estimated total value is $282,533 for the real property tax abatement. The 5-year personal property tax abatement will only be applied to manufacturing equipment, which is estimated at $2.9 million. The 5-year abatement schedule will be at 20% increments, beginning at 100% in year 1 and 20% by the year 5. The total estimated value of the real property tax abatement will be $99,617. The total estimated value of both real property and personal property would be $382,150. Company representatives are in attendance virtually, and co-founder David McIntyre would like to address the City Council with some comments. Both David and myself will be available for questions and comments and concerns afterwards.
David?
David?
Everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
This is David McIntyre, 16608 Hollyoak Drive, Westfield, Indiana, 46074. Good evening, councilors. As a Westfield resident and co-founder of West Fork Whiskey, I want to start by saying thank you so much for your time and consideration this evening. In regards to the abatements being discussed this evening, Kai and Brittany Mann from Bradley Company are here to answer any questions. But before I defer to them, I wanted to first tell you that these abatements were very integral in leading us to Westfield. So thank you again for your consideration. I also wanted to give you an update on our project. Since November, we've made great progress. Building plans are nearing completion, financing is in place, and we're hoping to break ground early this summer. We're building a first-class manufacturing and distribution facility the citizens of Westfield will be very proud of. This is our forever home, so again, thank you for your time and support this evening and over the last few months. Again, Brittany and Kai are available to field any questions at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? Okay. Kai, David, thank you. We'll move this forward then to the APC. The next item on the agenda is ordinance 2107, which is Midland South PUD. which is a new, I believe, a new project put in place by Old Town. And I think Caleb is gonna, Ernest is gonna address this to start with. Is that right, Caleb?
I can if you'd like me to.
Justin's here, Justin? Okay, we're gonna have Justin Moffett who's going to present it to us.
Okay.
Midland South, please, PUD. Great. Good evening, Justin Moffett with Old Town Companies. Two projects we're going to share about tonight. The first one is the Midland South PUD. If you scroll the next slide for me, give you a reference here. Kind of have some commingled slides here just for context because I think as most council members are aware, we've been very involved in the planning for the Grand Junction Plaza area of downtown Westfield. This project actually came about through our involvement in the Grand Junction Plaza area work and our Union Square project. And again, forgive me for kind of commingling some of these descriptions here, but tonight the second piece that we're going to introduce is a proposed extension of the Union Square PUD there on the north side of the Midland Trail between Cherry Street and Union Street. Number 2 is over that. And then the Midland South Townhome PUD that I'm going to share about right now is the area just to the south of that. You'll see a cluster of rooftops there. Again, on the right side, on the east side is Cherry Street. On the west side, immediately west of our proposed site plan is Westfield Friends Church, and then Union Street to the west of that. Roosevelt Street to the south, and then the Midland Trail to the north. One of our goals in working on the Union Square project was to find more available public parking. And in that process, we were looking at land in the downtown area, started a conversation with a longtime Westfield resident and business owner, Jeremy Fish of Firm Foundation. He owned the 5 acres north of Midland Trail, and we reached an agreement to acquire that from him. That's the next project we're going to share with you. In the process of having that dialogue, Jeremy Fish owned a portion of this property south of the Midland Trail, and a private individual owned another piece, and then Union Bible College owned the majority of it. Those 3 sellers teamed up together and offered to sell us this parcel for a proposed redevelopment site for sale residential. We've had about almost a year now of dialogue with Union Bible College, Westfield Friends Church, and the Firm Foundation, Fish family, all those property owners, and came up with a site plan to develop for sale townhome product. So if you'll advance for me here. Here's just rough outline of the site. It's just under 3.7 acres, around 500 feet of frontage on the Midland Trail. We've gone through multiple iterations of potential site plans based on our friendly dialogues with Westfield Friends Church and with Union Bible College, trying to make sure that we're meeting all of our neighbors' needs and wants. I would tell you that the conversation with Westfield Friends Church is ongoing, and we've talked about possible co-development opportunities if we need a little more ground, or they want some ground from us, maybe some additional buffering, or maybe a swap for parkland. At this stage, though, the church hasn't made any decisions, so we have decided to go ahead and just file our proposed plan on the land that we control. And just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we've been in very friendly discussions with them about how we can collaborate. If you'll advance for me one more. This is a site plan, assuming that we just move forward with the 3.7 acres we're acquiring from the private sellers, Union Bible College and Firm Foundation. And what you see here is a series of rear-loaded townhomes on an alley, or front-loaded townhomes, meaning front door is adjacent to the garage, with all of these prominent street fronts having architecture that faces out. We know it's very important that the Midland Trail has a nice, is treated as a street front as well, in addition to Cherry Street and Roosevelt. So what you see here is around 46 townhome units. Again, all proposed to be loaded from an alley configuration. What you're seeing here is 2-car garages and 2-car driveways. So a lot of townhome development you see around the market has narrow alleys with limited parking aprons. It ends up being very congested. We think with the price point we're targeting at $350,000 to $450,000, excuse me, that it's desirable to have plenty of surface parking for residents and guests. If you'll advance forward for me. This is conceptual architecture for the product. We know that as we march through the APC process, there will be some feedback received that might influence adjustments to the overall concept. But this is something that we've developed that we consider American farmhouse style look that's attractive and has what we would call four-sided architecture. One of the things that Old Town is known for is having well-designed outdoor living spaces. A lot of townhome product in our market and many others has pretty limited balcony deck spaces. It's very typical to see a 3 foot deep by 6 foot wide balcony at the second level. Each of these floor plans has what we would consider an outdoor living room, really prominent outdoor space, which we think will be attractive for this downtown market. If you'll advance for me. I'll run through these pretty quickly. The floor plans that we have designed for this are pretty well vetted at this point. Again, as we move through the APC process, we know that comments we made that will influence adjustments to these plans. But just wanted to give you a sense of what we're considering here. Again, oversized 2-car garages, alternating patterns here so we don't have homogeneous architecture. So porches that protrude out and some that set back. If you'll go forward, there we go. This is unique. If you shop in the townhome market, you would not find anything like this in the market where you have 20 foot wide by 8 to 10 foot deep covered porch spaces. We think that this is a first class design and would be very well received in the downtown Westfield area. So 3-level product overall. Main level can accommodate a bedroom and garage space. Second level and all the floor plans are designed as all living space with large outdoor living areas. And the third level, if you'll advance for me. Again, 2 more bedrooms in this configuration. Overall, the units are around 18 to 2,200 square foot. We think the average sale price will be in the $375,000 to $400,000 price range. And if you'll advance one more, just to give you a sense of a landscaped streetscape of what we think the finished product would look like. Our desire to pursue this first came from a request by some landowners in downtown that had assembled this ground and asked if we'd be interested in it. But we jumped on it because in our conversations around Union Square, we kept hearing from residents who would like to see more for sale new construction downtown. And we have done a lot of home building in Westfield, but not as much of the urbanizing downtown. And we think that it's a unique opportunity to get some walkable downtown for sale product. And I know that owner occupied is desirable to have a mix there between the proposed for rent that we're doing and others are doing, and to have owner occupied residences here. So we understand that we're just now starting the process, and we'll engage in great public dialogue about this. But so far we've been excited to advance the conversation with Westfield planning staff and the neighbors at Union Bible College and Westfield Friends Church. So with that, I'll gladly take any questions from council. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Justin. Questions, councilors? All right, well, I guess this is just an introduction, so it's pretty exciting, very exciting.
Thank you for your time.
Looking forward to hearing more about it. So, might as well stay there. The next ordinance, 2108, is Union Square PUD Amendment 1. And again, it's up for introduction, and it's Old Town, and Justin, go back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, for the record, Justin Muff with Old Town Companies. And I kind of give you a teaser intro there with talking about how we got involved in the Midland South Townhome Project. I'll ask if we just advance here. Most folks are familiar with our original Union Square project that we brought in front of the council in 2019. And just for citizens who might be listening to this, I wanted to give a little introduction to or explanation rather for kind of what's transpired since approval. It was late in 2019, I think the very last meeting of the City Council of 2019, where all the approvals were put into place. In 20, we hit the ground running, thinking we were going to launch a project, and then everybody's talked about the disruption of 2020. We experienced a bit of that, maybe some uncertainty about, if we should move forward, when we should move forward. Probably the two bigger factors, though, were the maybe uncertainty around the final plans for State Road 32, certainly influenced our timing. But the other big factor was there's a legal drain that runs through the property from State Road 32 down to Jersey Street. And we had to work through plans to figure out how to encapsulate that. And that's a process that we go through with county surveyor. We've already talked about county surveyor tonight and that work. A lot of discussion around that, but then also the approval and the permit process goes through the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. So long runway to get that approved. So us, being heavily invested in the project already and committed to seeing this move forward, even with the uncertainty of last year's, we invested several $100,000 in advancing that engineering work and laying the groundwork for pre-development there. So we did make progress in 2020, but as we continued the dialogue with other local business owners, again, parking kept coming up as a concern. Our original plan required that we accommodate our own parking needs, but it didn't demand that we accommodate parking needs for other projects within the downtown area. But we did see an opportunity to maybe address some parking mitigation through our project, and that was something that the city administration, I'll give Mayor Cook credit for that, he asked us to at least not close the door on the potential of adding a public parking structure within our project. So we had always contemplated that as being a possibility within our development. Again, knowing that we couldn't be a one-size-fits-all solution for downtown parking needs, we started the search for maybe expanding surface parking, and that's when this expanded site came to our attention, and we started negotiating with that property owner. If you'll advance for me here. For a conversation tonight, and I encourage you to not get fixated on these images absolute and final. We still have to go through an APC approval process and council approval process to build structures as shown. But we wanted to show what would be possible if both we advance the addition of the expanded Union Square project area, the 5 acres on the east side of Union Street, north of Midland Trail. But it also shows what a structure would look like if we build a parking garage within our Union Square project, or inside the original project. And that's the multi-story building, kind of top left of your screen. That's an apartment project with main level retail that's wrapped around a parking garage. The zoning for our project, our original Union Square project, allows for that. It would really, to build a project with a garage of that scale, though, would involve economic development participation by the city of Westfield. And so that's a conversation we're having that's ongoing with city administration, that if the city decides that that is logical, reasonable, viable, that they will bring an ordinance to the city council for consideration. So for today, what we're really talking about is seeking approval for the expansion of the Union Square project. And these images represent kind of what we would propose if that were to be approved. Please advance. Again, I want to just highlight the current thinking on the original Union Square project area. This is kind of aerial site massing of what it would look like. Just for context, State Road 32 to the north, Union Street to the east on the right side of the screen, and Grand Junction Plaza and Jersey Street to the south. As a reminder, since this council, most of the members were not participating. I think most of council members were familiar with the project, they were paying attention to what was going on, but it was a lot of previous council members that saw this through to the original adoption. Jersey Street is intended to be in the Grand Junction Plaza Park project, kind of a pedestrian-friendly street. The idea that you could close it at either end for public events. And so our goal was to design something that flowed from our project into Grand Junction Plaza. And if we were to do a project where we incorporated a public parking garage into that large building there on the left, we would have direct flow of pedestrian traffic from our parking structure into Grand Junction Plaza area. It's of note that we intentionally did not show a entrance or exit to the garage off Jersey Street because it's very likely that would be closed down frequently for public events. In total, we're showing around 215,000 square feet of residential multifamily housing in that project. I know that people want to know what does that equate to as far as unit count, and I'm going to give you an ambiguous answer. It will depend on final design because we will end up with a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, but 215,000 square feet is what's proposed there. We'll say that's going to be an average of 180 to 200 units though at this stage. We're also showing the potential of a food and beverage concept. Could be multiple restaurant spaces immediately to the east of our multifamily garage structure. That's represented with the 3 on top of it. We've been calling it the Union. We think it could be a unique public gathering space. And then we think that there is a growing market for Class A office space in the downtown. Not a massive building, but something that's boutique feeling that fits the vibe of downtown. And we're showing, as far as square footage there, a maximum of 4 stories and 50,000 square feet is possible. Right now, the images that we're showing, as far as what we're representing in the color diagrams, we're showing a 3-story building, but we're just acknowledging that it could go up to 4, depending on what kind of user would like to be in that space. Advance for me, please. And again, here's a schematic design of what the buildings could look like. I will represent to you that the overall architectural quality is what we intend and what's supported by the PUD. As far as the final design of the buildings, that's really going to be dictated by the final users that we put in place in each of these structures, and the public dialogue and the APC's process that we have committed to go through. The Union building there, it's kind of a modern look in this diagram. We're open, again, to feedback. If the community would like to see something that has a more historic look, we think that would be okay. But we think that this is attractive and will speak to the younger generation that we think will be interested in being in the downtown and the residential housing. If you'll advance for me here, just another night shot of what that could look like. Our goal was to just share with the city leadership of how our project would orient and kind of respect the park boundaries, but also, we're taking advantage of the city's investment in building these structures here. We want to capture the great views of Grand Junction Plaza when it's complete. So we've really set this up to focus really on the park across the street. And then really the meat of the discussion here is the expansion of the Union Square area. So this is the amendment that was filed capturing this 5 acres that sits, again, east of Union Street, west of Cherry Street, north of the Midland Trail here. There's a legal drain that forms the northern property line that runs through Grand Junction Plaza and then subsequently through this site. We're doing some mitigation work, again, through Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA to clear up some flood limits. But this is the buildable area that we'll have when we're done. We're showing the addition of, at this stage, 3 buildings. Again, as we go through the APC process, that could be adjusted. But this could add an additional 110,000 square feet of residential housing. And that could equate to approximately 100 additional units. And we're showing at this stage 10,000 square feet of additional retail space on the main level of the building that fronts the Grand Junction Plaza there, building 1, looking at the park. We're showing at this stage, this represents 205 surface parking spaces. In our designs, we would consider adding some parking underneath the buildings, but that's not finalized. At this point, we're just representing the 205 surface spaces. It would also add about 25 additional on-street spaces on Union and potentially Cherry, but right now we're just focused on the surface. The unique opportunity that this property affords is that we can add parking immediately to serve the downtown, the Grand Junction Plaza area. We could clear out the existing structure there that's facing Union Street that's kind of unsightly at this point and get some parking going. So if we were to move forward with the public parking structure at the original Union Square project and add this in, we'd end up at around 650 parking spaces on street, in the garage, and surface. We've done some initial study, and we know that we'll need to prove out our unit counts to the APC and council. But we think at our max, occupancy of all our projects, meaning, we're always calculating for different times of day. So we're not going to have the office uses full on evenings and weekends. And so we will develop a formula to share and come to agreement on. But we're showing that maximum, we're going to need 450 spaces at our peak. And so we think that at the worst-case scenario, we'll have a couple hundred public spaces available at any given time. But for most of the day, there'll be significantly more than that, but we'll continue to vet that out as we have dialogue about this project with the council. If you'll advance for me. Just to give you a perspective, the building top left is just a representation of what the architecture could look like. The massing and scale of the building, though, is what's represented in our drawings and what we're basing our square footage on. The bottom right is what exists there today. It actually is in worse condition than when that picture was taken. And so I'm not convinced yet that everyone will agree that the top left is what should be built, but I think we'll receive little remonstrance from removing the structure in the bottom right. That also is the area, that we can immediately get removed yet this spring, summer, and put more gravel down and have immediate surface parking to add to the downtown parking stock. And then finally, just to kind of another angle of this structure here. As a reminder, in our original PUD ordinance for the Union Square project, we had represented 4 to 5 story structures adjacent to the park that were multifamily housing structures. What you see here is not dissimilar to what we represented the first time. Architecturally, the opinions were all over the place on what downtown residents would like to, and citizens would like to see us build. We tried to do our best to aggregate opinions by providing conceptual, architectural concepts for people to give us feedback on. We know that as we move through this process, we'll continue to have public dialogue. But overall, the scale and square footage and volume of the Union Square project isn't dissimilar to what was initially proposed. Really, the big distinction is the addition of more area, the expansion across Union Street, and then we're bringing into this the discussion about the potential of public parking structure. So with that, I'll pause and take questions, but I acknowledge that this will be a lot of heavy lifting for council to have these dialogues with us, and it will be a multi-month process, so looking forward to working with you.
Great. Councilors, questions, comments?
I just have one comment. Not that I want us to look like Fisher's, because that's the least of what I would like, but I do appreciate Fisher has a similar multi-use structure with the parking in the inside, and it's certainly preferred over seeing a parking garage that's not covered by that, because then it's just kind of an eyesore. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are meeting a need we desperately need downtown without having to look at a concrete parking garage. So I do appreciate that.
Justin, I have one comment. So I'm actually going to use a Joe Edwards analogy here. So it's scary, right?
That's scary.
Okay, so, and I've told you I like what you've done. I told you that, personally when we met. And everything looks nice. I think one thing that, I would like to see in terms of a city is what the entire downtown is going to look like. And I think I kind of conveyed that to you. Because although it looks good and it's a start, but if everybody else builds, shanties around it, it isn't going to look good. So I kind of equate it to, and here's my Joe Edwards piece. So I equate it to going to Cracker Barrel and saying, I want chicken. I'd like the fried chicken. And they say, well, okay, great. And I said, well, I'd like to order my sides. And they're like, well, not so fast. You're going to have to wait on your sides. And so they bring out my fried chicken, and I was looking forward to that mashed potatoes. And they said, the only thing on the menu is fried okra. And I'm like, God, I don't like fried okra, right? So, I'd like to see more of what the whole downtown is going to look like, as opposed to just hoping that this spurs the rest of the downtown. And I know you don't have any control over that. I mean, and that's, part of the issue I think that we face as a city. What is this downtown going to look like? And I think if it starts with this, I think that's a great start. I am concerned, obviously, as I told you, with the parking garage. I want to see the numbers on the public-private part. We still haven't seen those. I'm hoping the city administration shares maybe what they're thinking at some point in time. It'd be great if they communicated that to us. That would help us to understand how this whole thing's going to look. And with that, that's my Joe Edwards story.
All right.
I'll give you another story. You will be destroying one of the historic structures in Westfield. the Legion Lunch. As a 7th and 8th grader, I used to run up there and get a greasy hamburger for 25 cents. And they never were very good, but I was glad to get them, I guess. But it's time for the Legion Lunch to go, I think.
Justin, tell me, years ago, I heard that there would be major drainage issues on this spot, and you mentioned in both, all the way up to the Army Corps of Engineers. So what's the certainty around the approval of the drainage before we get too far?
Sure. I can tell you that the investment that the city of Westfield has already made in the improvements at Grand Junction Plaza, and that might sound like I'm patting on city leadership on the back, but the reality is that went a long way to mitigate existing problems. That was money well spent, and so we do not have the risk that we would have had 10 years ago as far as water backing up and problems down the road. We are in the midst of an objective approval process for our permit. We did all the homework, provided the calculations. You'll love the fact that we get to pay a massive fee to the federal government for the privilege of paying to encapsulate the drain. So we get to do all the work and prove everything, and then we also get to pay almost a 6-figure fee to do the work that we're proposing. But we wouldn't have invested those dollars this last year if we weren't able to get an objective approval. So we cleared that with our engineers before we even started the work this last year. Kent Ward at the county is involved in this as well. We had to get his permission to start this process with the Army Corps. So anytime you encapsulate more than 300 linear feet, it automatically triggers a federal permit. And so when I mentioned that it's a federal approval process, it sounds onerous and maybe subjective, but the reality is as long as you can prove X, Y, and Z and check their boxes, you get a permit. It takes a lot of investment and engineering work to do that.
So what's the timeline behind the permit, or are you saying you already have the permit?
We are in queue for the permits. We have filed, and we should have it by late spring of this year.
So what are the odds that we approve all this and you don't get that permit?
Anything's possible, but I would tell you at this point, I've never seen a circumstance where you did the work you're supposed to do based on their objective checklist and you didn't get your permit.
Okay, thank you.
Justin, I would like to thank you for your efforts to date. I've been talking to Justin now for probably a year, and every time he comes forward, every couple months with new photos, new plans, and each one is better than the previous one and more thoughtful, and I'm just looking forward to see what's going to come out of the APC meetings, and I want to thank you for your efforts on this.
Appreciate your time and effort, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike,
And
can
Cindy
I
on the
ask one
phone.
question?
You have a question?
Hi,
Cindy?
Can you give us a quick update on where you are with relocating the Lions Club? Any agreement you have there?
Thank you for that question. The first year or two, we were working with Lions Club. It was an agreement to help them relocate. Last spring, they approached us and said, why don't we just come to an agreement that you purchase our property and we move on and make our own plans? And so that's where we're at as of today. We have given them a substantial earnest deposit and come to agreement on timeline on closing. And so they are in control of their own destiny, and I think that's healthier for all of us.
Oh, thank you for that update.
Yes, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I gotta find it, sir.
Just some points of clarity for the mechanics of this, for the council's edification. To your point about fried okra, that's the APC process, so you guys will have an opportunity to obviously legislate that. I'm sorry?
Todd Bertram.
That's right.
Yeah, just want to introduce
Yes.
yourself. For those that
I
are out
thought
there.
maybe I didn't know it needed introduction. The other component of this, Justin and I and his team have been working really since
late last year to ferret out this concept of the finances. And so it's our, we have some draft work product from Jim Treat. And my cadence moving forward is to meet with Council Finance Chair, the Chair of the Redevelopment Commission, as well as the Economic Development Commission, because that would be the mechanisms in the statute that we'd bring this forward for funding and approval. So when we have those, we just met again today briefly, those numbers updated based upon the forecasted increment that these two projects, phase 1 and 2, would generate to cover the obligation of the public garage. We will bring those forward to you. As a matter of note, next week the Redevelopment Commission does in fact meet, and we'll present to them expanding the suballocation area to include phase 2. That's no commitment on anybody's behalf. We're just drawing lines on paper in preparation because there is a timeline that Old Town has. I'd like to move forward in a final design. So when you read that, that's not a predisposition to anybody being committed to anything. It's just establishing lines on paper and going through the process. Any questions at this point?
Thank you, Todd. Next item on the agenda, ordinance 2109, Harmony PUD attachment for the Kitty Academy. Again, this is an introduction, and I think, is Caleb Ernest going to do the presentation here?
Council members are doing introductions.
Yes.
And then the petitioner will.
Oh, okay. Caleb has nothing to say, okay.
So I am available to give a brief presentation on this, unless there's a petitioner that would like to do a presentation.
So the petitioner's here.
Okay.
Hey, Caleb, Brad Schruggy. So, Brad Schruggy, American Construction Point. We were working with Woodmont, who is also on the line, I believe, for any questions that may come up as part of this. So they're from out of town, and I will be here tonight. But so we're here tonight for an amendment to the Harmony PUD. Woodmont has commenced construction on the Kitty Academy project here on lot 2B. There's 2A and 2B are the two lots that you see there just north of the CVS. It's been subdivided at this point. The amendment to the PUD is exclusively in regards to signage. There is a request to amend the PUD to allow an additional monument sign along Ditch Road just north of the private access drive.
Oh, that would be
We're
great.
unable to hear him. Can he come to the podium?
Sorry,
Get closer.
I didn't unmute my microphone, so I apologize. Let's start again. Sorry for that.
You're good.
Again, Brad Schruggy, American Structure Point. So the amendment that we're requesting is in regards to the, to allow a monument sign for these two lots here, just north of the CVS. So it's lots 2A and 2B within the Harmony PUD subdivision. The southern lot is being currently under construction is the Kitty Academy. The northern lot's currently unplanned, but this sign would go between the CVS north of, and the Kitty Academy building just north of the private access drive that runs east-west off of Ditch Road, there north of 146th Street. That is the only item being requested. I believe we're going to update, if you're looking at the ordinance itself, the only signage update is or modification is in regards to the monument sign. There's also some building signage included on the exhibit, but that'll be removed as we work through it. But, so it is right there. That monument sign would be located, and we'll blow that up, but just north of the access drive there on the east along Ditch Road. Happy to answer any questions, and as I said, Woodmont is also available. Grant and Craig are on the line for any questions you guys may have currently.
Brad, I know this is just an introduction, but as I've been out on that site, and I was actually out there day before yesterday, and Kitty Academy is just about complete at this point.
Correct.
Looks great. But, so the monument sign that you're talking about would basically be extremely similar, if not identical, to the other signs that are up there on the same corner?
Correct. The architecture, or the design of the sign is to match the building, but there is an existing monument sign that is south along 146th Street. It's very similar in design. I believe that one had a column on each end. This is a single column sign. But yes, it'd be similar in design to that.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Any other questions? All right, then we'll, thank you.
Perfect, thank
Look
you very
forward to
much.
seeing you back. All right, the next on our agenda, ordinance 2110, the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD. Council introduction, Birch, Dalton, and Jim Ake is going to speak. Jim.
Yes, thank you, council. It gives me pleasure to reintroduce to you the Woods Robinson PUD 21-10, which is very simple. Oh, thank you. We do have a problem with that switch. Sorry about that. The history here is that we received, after a favorable recommendation from the APC, that we needed to come back to you because we discovered that through council remarks after it was recommended by APC that you had some concerns as a body, and we wanted to appear before you and go through the protocol, which involved going back to the APC where they suspended the rules and waived the 9-day requirement and gave us time to recreate a new ordinance. So what is before you today is essentially the same ordinance with a subtle change in that we got feedback that the new suburban rental community was not something that was looked upon favorably by this body. And so we wanted to redo that, and we were able to eliminate Section 2 of the, and take out all the 300 units that were in the ordinance as the new suburban rental. In its place, we've exchanged the number, and you see the site plan up there. I think you can read it. But what we have done, thank you, is we've added single-family lots for sale, 1 and 2 stories, that will blend in with the single-family lots section you see in the lower left-hand corner right there. And so by doing so, with the 300 units gone, we've decreased the density within that, and we've added for sale 1 and 2 story homes in that area. So it's a reduction in units of about 120. We haven't got the final numbers, but it's approximately 120 to 150 units less, which gives you lower density, and the plan seems to work very well for us. And if you'll notice then, so that's the single-family lots is absorbed into Section 4. We've eliminated one of the sections to the north, and the park is now designated as Section 2, and instead of having 5 districts, we will have 4. And then the mixed-use part of the component there remains pretty much the same as we presented before. And so we would ask that you look favorably on these changes and that we would appear before the, go back to APC where we will hold another public hearing. We have a neighborhood meeting scheduled for February 11th at 6 p.m. at the cafeteria on the first floor of the GPEC. And then we would have the public hearing, we hope, at February 16th before the APC. And so those are the major changes we've made, and I'm here if you have any questions for me, or the petitioner is here, Birch Dalton, and we have representatives from Weekly Homes. So I would entertain any questions at this time that you might have.
Thank you, Jim. Councilors?
Could I have a few comments, please? It's Cindy. You know, I was one of the people that had a number of issues with the last ordinance. In fact, most of my issues were not even with the suburban rental product, although I did have some, but I had concerns across the whole PUD. And in reading the current draft, I'm not seeing those things addressed. So I just want to warn you, I mean, those are still my concerns that I had before, and now there likely might be some new ones with what you're proposing in the single family. So just wanted to warn you, I've still got all the same concerns.
If you'll allow us to address those, Cindy, we can address those if you want to send us a note, we'd be happy to respond as best we can to your concerns.
I did send a pretty full list to staff with the last one. And so at least from the stuff that you're carrying over, those would still be valid in most cases. So you have some of them already.
All right, thank you. We'll take note of that.
Thanks.
Any other comments, councilors?
I just make a comment. Ironically, Saturday night, we met with a couple who were hoping to plant a church in Westfield. And it was just interesting to get their perspective at, they said, in the church world, which I do not work in, but in their perspective, they are amazed at the lack of churches in Westfield, and they feel like the market above 32, north of 32, that we certainly have room and residents coming that will fill churches. So I've always been happy to see this mock up here with the church and park right off the Monon Trail. I felt like could be a very positive thing for our community. I would also say this, as someone who's lived in this community for 10 years, the amount of times that I've heard people say, when are we going to develop around Grand Park? When are we going to develop around? They told us there's going to be all these things around Grand Park. There's nothing around Grand Park. I've heard that 1 billion times. So I hope that whatever needs to get worked out gets worked out. And if this is a quality development that we can, I'm looking forward to this, along with the what we heard about West Fork Whiskey earlier, to see some dirt moving around there finally. So we'll see what happens, but thank you for tonight.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. It's an exciting project. We think the water feature and some unique things that will develop in the commercial area will benefit us very well as a community and bring in much needed and additional AV in the commercial areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Moving on to our final ordinance of the night, ordinance 21-11, Orchard View PUD amendment. Kevin, is there someone here to speak to that?
Yeah, I unfortunately can't see the participant list myself. Is Paul Munoz on the call?
Yes, sir.
Oh, perfect. Go ahead, Paul.
Good evening. My name is Paul Munoz. I'm with Arbor Homes here presenting on behalf of the Orchard View PUD amendment. I know some of you may be familiar with the original PUD. When it came through, there was some concern regarding the cutout property along Spring Mill Road and us trying to work with that owner to acquire that property and make it as part of the PUD. At that time, we were unable to come to an agreement on that property, and the PUD went through the process and was approved. Since then, we have gone back to them to discuss right-of-way and some other issues that have come up regarding XLD cell lanes and passing blisters and things of that nature. We were able to come to an agreement with the property owner and are looking to purchase that and add that piece of property into the site plan for Orchard View. As you can see from the concept plan there, the total is 9 lots in addition to what was already approved. We believe this is going to be a quality addition to the overall layout because it will provide for the consistency along Spring Mill Road so that there is a consistent right-of-way from the north to the south all the way along the front of the project. The buffering will stay consistent, and it will also have an extension of the trail from the southern half all the way through to the northern part of that property. All of those lots will be internal to the actual development and will not be accessed from Spring Mill, so it does still just limits that one access along the road. And we have agreed to architectural features on the backs of any homes that would abut the buffer for Spring Mill Road. So it's a pretty small little addition there, but was something that I know council had approached us about to try to accomplish when we were first bringing it through, and were unable to do it at that time. And since then, we have been able to come to an agreement with the property owner, and hopefully this will be something that will be looked upon favorably by the council. Do we have any questions or concerns?
Councilors? Cindy? Okay.
I likely will have a few, but I don't right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Paul, thank you so much. I was one of those counselors that was concerned about that little piece of property there, and I certainly appreciate your efforts and look forward to seeing the presentation to APC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, moving on down the agenda. Kevin, do we have any cards from guests who would like to speak this evening?
We have one coming.
Okay, we see one, Judy Shuck.
Thank you.
And I think Judy's going to talk about Black History Month, is that right?
Well, good evening, and I'm Judy Stanley Shuck, 209 West Main Street. I just want to talk a little bit about Westfield history tonight, some trivia that we're pretty proud of. You know, every year during the month of February, our country recognizes Black History Month and so forth. And so, but our community of Westfield is recognized as part of that Black history and that celebration. We have the richest history in Hamilton County, and the Quakers that founded this community were known for their integrity and truthfulness, and they were the ones that believed that all humans were created equal and that no one could own another as a personal property. A lot of them were known as activists or abolitionists. They engaged in participating in the work of freeing the slaves because Indiana was considered a free slave. I can't breathe with this. Sorry. A lot of the historical accounts are written down by members of this community, and many were not because it was against the law and they were feared for their family and their lives. But one account is written by Frederick Douglass in his memoirs. And I'd just like to read that. This is a newspaper article. So this is a fact of history. It says several Indiana and Hamilton County history books recount the above story differently. In 1841 to 1842, they say that the Friends congregated at the home of Ephraim Stout in order to break away from the Westfield monthly meeting to found a radical anti-slavery branch. This meeting, they report, eventually became known as the Eagletown monthly meeting and grew to a membership of 130. It is reported even that Frederick Douglass, a one-time runaway slave and an outstanding orator, came to Stout's home at the height of the anti-slavery activities in the county. And so that's one thing, but we also know that Levi Coffin and his wife Catherine had family here in Westfield, so they traveled to Westfield several times and also helped with the Westfield Anti-Slavery monthly meeting. Other people, community members later had written accounts of what happened with the Underground Railroad and so forth, of what Westfield is so famous for. But Martha White Talbert, her diary is written before, at the very beginning of the anti-slavery, and it was her brother that went to listen to Frederick Douglass in Pendleton, and they had a mob when he spoke, and he was hit by a brick, and so forth. But the Quakers around Pendleton did help them to safety and so forth. But I do want to say that we don't have statues in Westfield to recognize these citizens, but we do have structures dating back to pre-Civil War days and are listed on the National Registry of Historical Places. And I have a quote here from Mark DeLassy from Indiana Landmarks. It says the National Park Service has defined the National Register of Historic Places as the nation's historic places worthy of preservation. And this is something to be very proud of. He also states that we believe that every contributing building within the Westfield Historic District greatly adds to the city's uniqueness and authenticity and works symbolically to create a true downtown destination. That's the buzzword I keep hearing. We want a destination. Small business, including local restaurants, retailers, and service providers, want to be in the vibrant historic downtown. Removal of viable historic buildings goes contrary to best planning protection or best planning practice. I can't read this. Where historic buildings are retained alongside busy thoroughfares and modern infill construction. This goes far beyond saving old relics of the past. It is truly about creating a more sustainable, vibrant, and character-rich city. And I want to go on and say, while history should not be erased, we learn from these lessons. History seems to not be told as truth anymore. For citizens who took chances for their life and family, we are very grateful. I want you to, when I have done tours before, I want you to imagine being in Westfield. It was densely populated, densely buildings and so forth, and yes, it was a wooded area, but these people were traveling all over the place. Martha White Talbert traveled to Iowa and to Kansas to anti-slavery meetings. They crossed the Mississippi. They talk about that in her diary. They go to Indianapolis, they go to Noblesville. They traveled all over the place, and they sure didn't have Uber or big SUVs or anything else to travel with. Even talks about her mother walking from Noblesville. And that just kind of broke my heart. But they were tough. They were tough people, and I am very grateful for that. There is still a presence of history in Westfield, and some unfortunately want to destroy it. I know that the Westfield Historical Society has received a cabin that was in a barn on Moontown Road, but maybe it wasn't Moontown. But anyway, and they want to restore that, and I'm grateful for that. That is a structure to be saved. There is still a presence of everything in Westfield, but not everyone can say that Frederick Douglass or Levi Coffin came to their community and helped establish the monthly meetings, but Westfield sure can. And to visit history, you want to experience it. Imagine going to listen to Frederick Douglass speak at Pendleton, being mobbed. When we see, touch, and walk through a structure, you can experience what our ancestors experienced. There have been many plans written out to save historical structures in Westfield, but they are still destroyed. And you don't know, this is my quote, you don't know where you came from if you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you came from, you won't know where you're going, period. Kids today need history to learn how to respect the past so they can appreciate the future. And that's my passion.
Thank you.
Judy, thanks. I just wanted to personally thank you for reminding us about the history of Westfield. I mean, we were a diversified community before they had the word diversity. And it's something that's a heritage we need to be proud of. It's a heritage that we always need to keep in mind as we're developing our community. And I think I want to challenge the council, the administration, as we move forward in our comprehensive growth plan for the next several years. One of the things that we have to offer through economic development and trying to bring people to us, we have a very rich and historic past. It's unique to very few communities within this nation. I think we need to make sure we incorporate that in our economic development plans. So, thank you, Judy. At this point, why don't we move on to council comments? And start with, we have comments from the Finance Committee?
Yeah, so we just had we had a meeting this morning. I think we had maybe some miscommunication. I thought we were going to talk a little bit more, or get some information from the administration on a few topics, but we did cover the tunnel and Hawk system, and we did talk a little bit more about that, and we covered some of that information. And then we have this ongoing dialogue that will move forward and further with the entire city of Westfield, what we look like from a tax base, what we're covering. I met with Mayor Cook this morning. He told me to call him Andy, but I'm going to call him Mayor Cook still, just for the record. And it was a good. He and I had a great conversation. I think a lot of good things came from it, and I think things that we need to think about as a city council and a community, and how it relates to our finances. And I think our next two meetings, we're going to get into more of that. So that's it.
Joe, any comments from the? No. Okay.
No meetings yet.
Scott Frey?
Yeah, I just want to take an opportunity here very quickly and talk about something that I think needs to be addressed, and that is, obviously we've got some stuff going on, some citywide investigation, that type of thing, as far as kind of doing some deep dives, and I know we're maybe at a little bit of a crossroads with some litigation that's happening right now with the administration, the clerk treasurer's office, and I just want to try to encourage both parties, everybody involved there, to use the taxpayers' money very cautiously and work together to get that resolved as quickly as possible. That would be my takeaway. And then on a much lighter note, I would like to point out that I'm reading the headlines right now. I can envision the headlines for tomorrow. And Councilor Patton is anti-okra. Will probably be a headline. So that's another takeaway.
All right. Cindy, do you have a report on the APC for us?
I do. I actually have a number of things. First, I really wanted to thank Donna Shively, our state rep. I talked to her today. There was some legislation, House Bill 1114, and specifically it was tied to residential building design and would prohibit a municipality from basically regulating most of anything to do with what we see in our PUDs, really. Really terrible for most communities. So she did not support that. I'm unclear because it did pass out of committee and was supposed to be heard tonight. I'm not sure if that happened or not, but I'm certainly hoping it didn't pass. But I know she did not support it. So I wanted to thank her. And from APC, they had a meeting on the 1st, and Bob Horke was elected president, Dr. Kelleher, vice president. Vision Westfield, which is at 17414 Tiller Court, they had a detailed development plan approved for an expansion, so that's great to hear. What we heard tonight from Mr. Dalton, well, not Mr. Dalton, I'm sorry, today for Mr. Dalton concerning Edrock development, they had requested that withdrawal and received that request from APC. We approved the Spring Mill Center overall development plan, and then we held public hearings for Sanders Glen, Lancaster Phase 2, Maple Knoll, PUD Amendment 5, the Lantern Commons Project, and the Wheeler Landing PUD. And we also introduced the, we started discussion on the UDO amendment concerning the PUD duration, which is referred to as the sunset clause. So we've started those discussions, and that will probably take a while to move through. So that's it from APC. I did want to say too, in the future, you know, we've had an effort before in the city. It was commonly known as the Hoover Commission. I think I've discussed this all with you. And they did a lot of the work with staff to revise a number of things and create our UDO and just lots of different amendments. So I'm wanting to see a group get together again, and I've kind of developed who I want actors to be personally. Mayor has directed that staff can't really assist us until we're all educated. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but looking forward to getting that done and then making progress. And I'll report anything back to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Scott Willis, any comments? No. Any information on the library that you can share with us?
Sure. So the library has narrowed our new construction project down to 2 locations. And over the next, actually we got a meeting tomorrow or Wednesday to discuss what the actual offers are between the 2 projects. And then we have a meeting on the 24th where we're going to vote on those 2 sites and which one we decide to move forward with. So we're getting close, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, good, interesting, good stuff, good stuff. Jake, anything on well-being? Good. I mean, I can see your eyes, or your eyelids or bags are hanging down.
Sure, the well-being.
You've been working long hours, so.
We have 3 committees from the Wellbeing Coalition up and running. Mental health, outreach, which is connecting people to resources and services of our nonprofits and city, and connections, which connects people to people, including events and Westfield Welcome and so forth and so on. So great start so far. We have 3 meetings per week, 1 for each of those committees, and then the executive board meeting. So lots going on, and hear from us a little more soon, I think.
Good, thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of comments then. First of all, I want to let everyone know that I think it's important. We've got a couple of issues we're carrying over from last year. There were 2 ordinances we were working on. We're still working on them. The one is the Sunset Ordinance, and that, as you know, is an ordinance for developers to make sure that we don't have a development get approved and nothing happened for 15, 20 years. And we introduced that at the APC last couple weeks ago, so that has been introduced. We've got a lot of good feedback so far from developers on that. Over the last 6 months, we've been having developers write their own sunset clauses into ordinances that we've approved. So hopefully we'll be able to get some standards that everyone agrees upon and get that ordinance out within the next 2 to 3 months. That's our goal. And then we're also going to, and Cindy Spoljeric is kind of taking that under her wings, if you will. Scott Fry is going to be looking at finalizing and bringing forth the transparency ordinance that we had introduced last year at this time. And again, our goal to bring full transparency to our community, so we know what's happening here. Moving forward, I'm going to ask that our committees each give a report and make a report to the council on a monthly basis. We won't do it every meeting if there's a couple meetings during the month, but at least once a month we'd like to hear from the Finance Committee, the Oversight Committee, and from the APC. Cindy talked about the APC. So we have an idea of what's going on with the city. The only other thing I guess that I would add is that I would ask the council as we move forward, when we look at projects that are being presented, please look at them from a holistic standpoint. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we look at projects individually as rifle shots, but in the big picture, they're all related and interrelated. And if we approve one project, there may be 2 or 3 projects that are associated with that. And I think we need to take those into account, particularly from a financial standpoint and from a planning standpoint. It's kind of like when you're buying a car. It's easy to go out and get a car, but you need to decide what size car do I want, what size family do I want. If I've got 6 kids, I probably am not going to buy a 2-seater car for a primary vehicle. But then in addition to that, I have to be aware that I've got insurance needs on that. I'm going to have maintenance needs moving forward. So again, it's that big picture that I just feel we need to look at as we move forward. And I encourage all of us to keep that in mind. So I know I'll do my best. That's all of my comments for tonight. Is Mayor, are you on there? I don't think that Andy was going to be able to be with us tonight. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Awesome.